Hopefully everyone says, yes, I accept the recording. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wendy Kavanaugh. I'm President and CEO of NPFDA. Thanks for joining us for our webinar this afternoon featuring Environ Energy. And we're really excited to get started. Oliver, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce everyone.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Appreciate everyone's time and being here with us today to talk through some very exciting stuff around energy. I'm Oliver Ho, Director of Energy Solutions at Environ. I've actually had the opportunity and privilege to serve on the board of directors for NPFDA for the last couple of years, and I'm now the co-chair for the content committee. So I'm very involved in meat processing and distribution sector. So thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity. I'm joined by Ben Walker, Vice President of Markalytics, and Chris Racine, Vice President of Solutions. We really have this set up today, and I would say sort of three different particular pieces to present. Ben's going to take us through what we would consider best practices around energy and natural gas procurement and important things to consider, as well as a market update around natural gas. This winter has been crazy, right, in terms of the weather that we've seen and the impacts on both power and natural gas pricing. So that's going to be fun to look at some of the analytics and what's transpired over the last few months. And Chris Racine is going to talk us through some engineering solutions, primarily focused on preventative maintenance, things to consider, just on general maintenance around your plants or operations, as well as some key ways to identify or opportunities that can move the needle in relation to energy conservation measures. And we can move along here, Ben. Again, we've been partnered with NPFDA for about 25 years under APPI Energy. It's the legacy division of Environ. Environ is the combination of about 10 different companies now that have been put together over the last 6 years. And so now we're completely operating as Environ. And again, I've had the opportunity to be very closely involved with NPFDA over the last few years. Next slide, Ben. So again, very quickly, part of the goal of Environ is to put together an end-to-end energy management company. So, we can really help support members and clients with all facets of energy management, whether it be energy procurement, which we're going to be speaking to today, electricity and natural gas, demand response, engineering. We're not geared towards greenfield, but retro commissioning and retrofits is really where we deliver the most expertise in helping identify energy conservation measures within the plant or operation, and then sustainability, emissions reporting, building performance standards, and decarbonization planning. So if there's anything we can help support you with, we're here and here to help. And with that, we're going to get directly into it. Ben Walker is going to take us through some key practices and considerations around energy procurement. Oh, and also, if anyone has questions as we're going through this, please put them in the chat, and we'll call them out as soon as they're put in. But again, thanks for everyone's time.
Yeah, thank you, Oliver, and thank you, everyone, for joining. As Oliver mentioned, we'll go through kind of building a program first, and then second, we'll go into kind of an energy update for you. To start with, when we look at energy procurement, one of the things that jumps out to us is the amount of different skills needed to effectively manage the all the needs that go into a procurement program, right? So you have to understand how the energy is used on site, as well as how it's purchased. The on-site usage is usually a facility manager or an engineering team. The how it's purchased is a combination of contract knowledge as well as financial risk management capabilities or risk tolerance, or any sort of kind of a budget tracking, right? Really at the organizational level. And then occasionally you have stakeholders concerned about things, the quality of the energy that's coming from, or any sort of investor disclosure on that. And it really turns into, because of the wide variety of skills needed, we find that a team approach is really the best. For some of our smaller clients in terms of headcount, it is one person running the show, and they lean on us for different elements of this. For some of our larger size clients, they do bring 2, 3, or even 4 decision makers into the room to make sure they have all the skills needed. When you have a team, it lets you tackle procurement, which is kind of my part of the webinar today, but it also lets you tackle things like efficiency improvements or any sort of equipment upgrades, which is kind of Chris's section. And so one of the reasons to pull that team together is you have the conversations about procurement, and then you kind of use that same team to address other needs around your organization, which is one of the reasons it's a really powerful way to just make progress. And kind of to Oliver's allusion earlier, it is the best practice. So for procurement, I tend to think of the market as trillions, billions, and millions. It's kind of what sticks in my head. But at the high end of the funnel, you've got investment banks who own trillions of dollars in assets. They're the groups that set the price of electricity or the price of natural gas. It's their traders who buy and sell on both sides. One step down from that, there are retail energy suppliers who own tens to hundreds of billions of dollars of assets, and they are the conduit into those energy markets. So it's their credit rating that gets them the price. It's their contract that you're signing that determines what you pay. And then at the lower end, our clients have millions to tens of billions. I don't want to shortchange some of our larger clients, but the energy buyers are still smaller than kind of the levels above them in the funnel. And really kind of having that understanding of, this really is a financial transaction, and it's the financial analytics and the financial rigor with which you would look at a contract that should drive much of your procurement decisions. We've made mention of electricity and natural gas. Depending on which state you're in, you have different choice of who you may choose for your energy supplier. So all energy has kind of a delivery component and a supply component. The delivery component is the pipelines or the wires to get it to your facilities, and those tend to be those will be covered by your local utility. Your energy supply, depending on where you live, you may have choice and you may not. So if you're in the US, you tend to have choice on all natural gas. There are some pocket municipalities, municipal utilities where you don't have choice, but you tend to have choice everywhere for gas. For electricity, if you're in a green state, you tend to have choice. And if you're not in one of the green states, it's much harder. So again, if you want to reach out to us, feel free. We'd be happy to talk you through that. But generally, we're going to focus on natural gas today. When we look at managing a electricity or natural gas procurement program, we tend to follow these 4 rules of thumb. We want to help you manage your supplier risk. Again, their credit rating, their balance sheet, that impacts not only the price you get, but also the confidence you have for them to stand behind their product. You don't want a supplier failing when winter storms are really bad. The 2021 winter storm Uri was kind of the most recent example where that was really painful for some of the market participants to have their supplier go bankrupt right when prices were at their highest. Contract risk. So this is the language itself. What elements are fixed? What are passed through? How much do you pay if a change in law event happens, or if it's just a changed rate? There's a lot in the contract itself that determines the kind of rates you pay, up to and including vague language that suppliers can sometimes take advantage of. If anything says incremental supply is at market rate, that's kind of a red flag, right? We want that to be much more auditable. I'll skip over market risk. We'll come back to that last. The last one, the 4th one here then is regulatory risk. That's just, as new rules change, it could be things like RPS changes or building performance standards, which tie into both energy usage as well as energy purchasing, but really trying to make sure that you're set up for success in a long term, and your energy contract plays into that. Coming back to market risk, this tends to be what everyone thinks about when they think about a procurement program, is managing that commodity spend and doing that in either a layered hedge portfolio, which we'll talk about on the next slide, or some sort of a managed product. This is really you can look at energy supply fundamentals to indicate how prices might move or have been moving, or give yourself a sense of a range of an outcome. And those are the things that we work with clients most closely when they are in this sort of a finance-backed decision-making process, where we are trying to set that risk tolerance and help clients navigate the complexities. I will be giving a market update here in just 2 minutes, but those are the 4 risks we look at in a procurement program. Lastly, I wanted to go through an example of what a layered hedging program looks like to give you a sense of when we talk about taking hedges or layering over time, what that might mean for you. We also sometimes use the term runway management, and the idea is having a long horizon on our purchases so that we can take advantage when the market opportunities present themselves. So the image on the top right, I mentioned earlier, tends to be every energy is broken into delivery and supply. This one happens to be gas. It's true for electricity as well. Your delivery component is determined by the regulators in your state, and it's not something we can control. So that is you must pay. The supply components are absolutely something that go up and down, and you have market timing and market strategy will indicate what you actually pay on the final bill. I have here the difference between NYMEX and basis. NYMEX is the commodity portion that is kind of the national benchmark for natural gas, and basis is the transportation cost to get it from the national benchmark to wherever your facilities happen to be. And so you can purchase both. So on a runway strategy, the most common approach is basis is such a small component of the overall bill, call it 10%. It varies region to region, but as a smaller component, we tend to fix that for the length of an agreement and then layer in hedges over time. And the alternative to that is if you don't layer in anything, then you just pay the spot price. And so an example would be you've got a 5-year contract, you've fixed basis for the full 5-year term, and then you purchase 25% of your natural gas needs as hedge 1. And then a couple months go by and you decide to come back and add a second hedge, and you might choose to only do years 1 and 2. But maybe you're happier with the price at that point, or you're more concerned about budget risk. And so you take a larger hedge. You take a 50% hedge for years 1 and 2. And then you come back a few months later, or even a week later, or maybe a year later, and you're hedging years 3, 4, and 5 for another 25%. And lastly, you might choose to get to 100% of your spend before the energy actually flows. So you might choose this 25% hedge to get all the way to 100% fixed price. Again, where you finally end up or the timing of all this, that's what we want to work with you to help identify what's best for your organization.
Ben, if I can jump in quickly here.
Please,
I think,
Oliver.
yeah, and you can speak more to it as well, but the value of breaking this up into incremental hedges is really diversifying market risk, right? If you go all in on one given day, you're essentially betting that is, the best day in the market at that particular time, right? Whereas we know it's hard to predict the bottom. We want to try and do that, but it's hard to do that. So by breaking it out, you can take chunks of the apple over time and then build that position out over time to sort of level out that market risk component.
You're exactly right, Oliver. Yeah. And, for those familiar with the term dollar cost averaging, right, that's kind of what we're doing is, to Oliver's point, multiple bites at the apple stabilizes your market risk. You can absolutely buy 100% all at once, and you're banking that is the cheapest time to buy energy. There are 250 trade days a year. Prices move within a day. So, hopefully you're picking the right hour, if not the right day. And it's, to Oliver's point, we do try to recommend when prices are favorable, but we're not going to try to pick the bottom. And that's really not what really anybody should be doing in this space, given the spend that I expect most of you have. The time that the 100% fixed, let me just buy it once and forget about it, that makes a lot more sense when your budget is 5, maybe 6 figures a year, right? If it's just not worth the effort to balance that. But when we start seeing budgets in the high 6 and 7 figure ranges, absolutely, we want to layer in over time to reduce that market volatility. Thank you, Oliver. So let's look at how markets are moving today, what's going on, and what should we do about it, right? That's kind of what we're trying to talk through. So what are the fundamental factors? Knowing that there are folks from around the country, I've given an example of Florida. We're going to zoom out to the Southeast region, and then we'll zoom out to the whole nation. So stay with me wherever you end up being. Hopefully there's information here that's useful. We purchase electricity and natural gas forward market price data for roughly 300 places around the US. So I happened to pick Florida for this example. On the image on the left, we talked about basis. So this is the transportation of natural gas from the national benchmark to the center of the state of Florida. And the blue lines represent the range, the highest trade and the lowest trade over the last 3 months. And then the dotted black line is today. I ran this, a couple weeks ago. So it was the forward price as of February 6th. And you can see that in 2026, we are seeing a price it's elevated. It's towards the higher end of the range. But as we get into 27, 28, and 29, we're seeing the basis price for Florida drop pretty substantially to the point that it's better than 99.5% of all the trade days. So again, if we were picking days, right, we don't want to pick days. Could it go down? Absolutely, it could continue to fall. But I will say that now is a very beneficial time to look at basis pricing for Florida. If you want to ask, well, why is it falling in 28 and 29? Why is it down? I'll speak to that a little bit on the next slide. But we've got that situation. So that's the basis range. And then on the right, this is commodity plus basis. So it's actually kind of the sum of both, depending. You might want to see commodity only. But I wanted to show this because it shows that, when basis was 40 cents, 30 cents, the total supply bill is going to be $4 bucks. So basis really is in that 10% range for Florida. And we are seeing those prices also. So the lines here are the kind of the calendar strip average. So you've got 2027 and how it's moved over the last 3 years. And again, we're better than 99% of all trades in the last 3 years for the delivered price of gas in Florida. If you happen to be in Florida, take a look at what prices are, right? It's kind of a pretty opportune time to at least evaluate what that looks like. In terms of why we might be seeing some price relief, we're seeing potential expansions of the pipeline network that's coming into the state. So zooming out from Florida, now this is the entire Southeast. So you've got Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina as the Southeast region, according to the natural gas network. And we're seeing the region on track to potentially increase by about 7% in the next few years. MVP, Mountain Valley Pipeline, was a big political issue under the Biden-Joe Manchin situation, but got passed a few years ago and approved, and it just started operating in June 24. And now they just received permits in December to extend the pipeline from Virginia down into North Carolina. So we're getting about a BCF a day, a little bit over that, potentially coming into the North Carolina region, which, again, just helps soften prices there. You've also got a compressor station upgrades for the pipeline bringing gas from the Mississippi, Alabama region up to the Georgia, South Carolina region. They just finished their environmental study in January of 26. I believe it's open comment period until March or May. But they've got a few months of an open comment period, and then they'll start construction. So they're targeting Q4 of 28. I think it'll slip, but they're getting closer to bringing that one on. And then Sabal Trail made national headlines a decade ago because it was the how FERC should treat emissions regulations. And so if you've heard of it, there's a long history of court cases on that one. But that was Sabal Trail 1. There's been Project 2 and now Project 3. Project 3 keeps asking for extensions. They can't quite get over the hump. They just got their third extension last May, but they are expecting to be in service coming up in about a year. So all this just helps provide more natural gas capacity to the state. As you get more natural gas capacity, then prices can soften a little bit, right? So that's especially why we're seeing basis drop so hard. Now at the national level, there's been also good news, which after Winter Storm Fern is maybe welcome. Note that Winter Storm Fern absolutely pushed up short-term prices. January or February prices, even March, those prices are elevated from winter storm that came through. And part of why we want to layer in so far in advance is to protect ourselves from those short-term bumps. While the prompt price went up like $3 per decatherm, which is like 100% move, the years 2 and 3 were up 30 cents or even less, depending on what time frame we're looking at. So you really do have opportunity to stabilize budgets if you keep that long time horizon. Coming back to the slide on the top right, This is the year-over-year changes of supply. So you can see in 2026, we expect an additional 2.15 BCF per day. That'll change, but the fact that it's positive is great. And the fact that it's greater than the 1.75 in the lower image of expected demand increases. It's also really good news that the production's higher. We did see production freeze-offs from the storm. We lost about 4 BCF per day in January. We'll recover from that. So the storm reduced our supply a little bit. We'll recover. It also increased our demand a little bit. The residential demand was up 4% over the entire year just because we had a cold January, February there. But at a whole, we're still seeing that supply is going to outpace demand. I'll note the images on the bottom right. Exports, that purple bar, that is LNG driven for the most part. And so LNG is a huge demand driver. And then right below that, you've got power burn in the green. And that's mostly from data center growth, but also kind of energy. Natural gas is the leading generator of electricity across the US. And so as we need more power, natural gas tends to be the place that we fill that. So those are the really two big demand drivers. And I want to dig into those actually now. So the question of where a new data center is looking to build is really important for what's happening to local prices. If you listen to senators from Massachusetts and governors from New York State, they're concerned about data centers, but there's no orange dots on those maps. They're not really looking to build data centers up there. Cost of power is too high. The cost of land is too high. So politicians are worried, but nothing much is happening there. They're worried because PJM and Texas and other areas are seeing such strong demand growth. Texas essentially wants to double its grid in like 5 years. PJM wants to increase theirs by like 40% in 5 years. Forecasts of growth that frankly look unrealistic or very difficult to achieve. So those forecasts come from data centers asking to join the ISOs. The markets, the regions. I use the term ISO. But the data centers are asking to join those regions, and really there's going to be some regulatory change around what that process to interconnect looks like. We're already seeing queues of data centers, as well as potential requirements around bring your own generation if you want to connect. So it will be really interesting to watch how that plays out over the next few years. I also wanted to highlight how demand from the LNG side kind of compares with that power side. So on the yellow line on the top, that's the demand from electricity, power burn, for natural gas. So you can see it ranges seasonally. We go up to about 40 or even 50 BCF per day in the summers when we need a lot of electricity. And then it falls down around 30 BCF a day when we are in the wintertime. Below that, you see the actual LNG exports. So we're at 15, maybe 17 BCF per day now of LNG exports. And the runway of LNG infrastructure, it's a lot more certain than the runway for power burn infrastructure. And in part, we've been trying to export LNG since 2016, 10 years now. And we've had a lot more time to get those projects queued up and to get the regulatory approvals and the construction timelines going. So the shaded area shows that we're going to continue to see LNG export growth really through 2029. We're pretty confident in that. And then you've got another chunk of kind of the darker blue of approved export capacity, but projects that haven't reached the final investment decision or haven't started construction yet. So we're pretty confident we're going to get to about 30 BCF per day in LNG. There's potential for us to get to 50. Kind of depends on what the investment and construction timelines look like for those projects. And then you compare that to the existing range we have on power burn. We have a real chance that in the next 5 years, LNG exports start to challenge power burn as the largest demand driver across the US. And this again is why we highly recommend the long time horizon on purchasing decisions. If you act now, you've got a little bit of time, or at least think about acting now. You've got a little bit of time to monitor market conditions and make decisions as events change. If you wait until December 31st, 2029, or even 2028, you might be in a situation where you don't have as much choice about what actions you can take, and you really just have to become what we call a price taker. You're waiting until the last minute. So that's kind of the roundup of energy market news. I live and breathe this stuff. If you want to email me later or call me later, I would be happy to talk for much longer about this. They had to cut my slides down. But I am going to transition it over to Chris Racine now to talk about some of our on-site equipment things.
And I just have one question, right? Part of the equation here is production.
Yeah.
Right. So we're seeing this huge increase from LNG exports, right? Sending it overseas to Europe or Asia. Everything's increasing there. Can you speak just 30 seconds on production and what we're seeing and how much gas we're pulling out of the ground and where it's coming from?
Yeah. Thanks, Oliver. So the production, we really are getting a lot of gas out of West Texas and Appalachia. So those are the two areas that we get a lot of gas out. We get it from other places in the US as well. The reason that's important is the West Texas gas actually is pretty reliant on oil prices because that's also where we get a lot of oil. So we have this weird oil and gas used to be correlated. So if you ask somebody 20 years ago, as one went up, the other went up. And we actually see the reverse of that now. As oil prices go up, we produce a lot more oil out of West Texas. And we get gas along with it kind of on accident. And most people in West Texas in the Permian Basin are after the oil. That's what they're trying to get. And the gas is like an accident. So as the price of oil goes up, they produce more oil, they produce more gas by accident, and they have to sell it, which actually drives up supply, but it drives down prices. So we're in a weird situation where in the US, especially in the Texas region, as oil prices go up, gas prices go down. So that's kind of an interesting wrinkle. And then to your point, the other point, Oliver, about the international elements, we see New England is more reliant on or more correlated with LNG prices because they do have an import terminal in Boston. But generally, overseas prices have been at times 10x. I think they're maybe now like 3x what the US domestic prices are. And so if you can export gas, you want to export gas. And so we have seen production realize this. Again, we've had 10 years to think about this problem. So a lot of producers have drilled wells, they've got them ready. There's two different ways they do it, but they drill a well and then they put a cap on it and they wait until they need to increase production and then they just turn the spigot on. So we are seeing response in the production side. I'm pretty confident that the production will be there. There's always, a couple month lag here and there, but in terms of a long-term balance, production is ready. They're just kind of waiting for demand to show up.
Nice. Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it. So, that was kind of on more so sourcing gas, right? Or power at the cheapest or most appropriate price to mitigate risk. So now we're going to transition over to Chris. Part of that is now how do we use less, right? So you want to make sure you're buying it at the appropriate price, but also that your plant or operation is being efficient and it's optimized in the way in which that we want to see. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you. So first, before we dig into kind of the shiny new upgrades, the fancy toys that we all want, we want to talk a little bit about getting back to baseline is what I call it, but really making sure that the system that was designed at 90% efficiency and that was installed 10 years ago is staying at 90% efficiency. And so when equipment drifts from its original specs, you not only lose obviously the efficiency gains that you expected and the ROI that you expected, but more critically kind of for this audience, you start to get into food safety compliance, right? Making sure equipment is up, making sure it is operational, making sure you're not having any issues in terms of runaway temperatures or sanitation. So first, as simple as it sounds, but your refrigeration is a core part of everything that you do. And having a preventative maintenance schedule that is annually and ideally like quarterly, checking on those condensers so that A, the coils are clean and the set points are established correctly and actually reading what is the actual temperature. That is the clearest way to prevent costly temperature excursions in terms of wild temperature swings that obviously we don't want to see. The second, in terms of industrial washdown, as well as kind of steam and scalding systems, making sure that those gaskets, the steam traps, as well as the valves are operating properly. So doing a preventative maintenance check. Steam traps, we'd like to say at least annually. In terms of seals and gaskets, ideally more like quarterly or even more frequently. That would allow your system to not have leakage, right? Ultimately, if you have a steam system that is just passing through steam at high velocity, you are leaking a whole bunch of steam. And if it goes the other way and the valves have failed to close, you potentially have areas where you're not getting steam. And that's obviously a sanitation risk as well as a operational risk. Third, the conveyor system. So making sure that the belts and drives and lubricants and bearings are all operating correctly. I think a lot of you are probably on top of this because at the end of the day, if production starts to complain, usually we jump, especially on the facility side. So that's usually something that is addressed very frequently. But if you can get ahead of it instead of in a kind of break fix environment where you're just jumping at every reaction and you're starting to have a preventive maintenance schedule and an inventory of all that equipment, it will make your life easier long term. And then lastly, compressed air, which is usually specific to pneumatic equipment. Making sure that you are doing regular leak studies at least every other year, ideally every year, and making sure that the filters and the maintenance are done as well as on the dryers for your compressed air system. The fun test for compressed air is to, if you go in when there's no production, when the lines aren't running, see how many compressors are running. See how much the system needs to be on just to operate the pressure of the lines without any pneumatic air actually being used. I think that can usually be very telling. Sometimes we see 2 or 3 compressors firing regularly, even though there isn't a single piece of equipment being used in the plant. In terms of equipment upgrades, once we've kind of identified the low-hanging fruit, handled the preventative maintenance, what are the opportunities for potential efficiency upgrades? A lot of this can be incentivized by your local utility, whether it's state or utility-based incentives. Sometimes there's grants. It really depends on your jurisdiction, similar to kind of Ben's explanation. Different parts of the country treat each of those incentive programs very differently. That being said, the technology is really consistent throughout. First, high efficiency refrigeration systems, having a refrigerant system that is well maintained, but is also, in its useful life. At the end of the day, if you have a piece of equipment that's 30 years old and was only supposed to run for 20, you can only do so much on the maintenance side. And there have been significant steps on refrigeration in terms of efficiencies that can certainly be gained by upgrading to new equipment. Second, heat recovery. That's typically a major opportunity for this industry. You have a lot of waste heat going out to the door, whether it be from kind of sanitation as well as just the boiler itself. And that could potentially be reused to preheat water that is used for other applications like process, like sanitation. That doesn't have to mix waste streams by any means. It's simply a water-to-water heat exchanger that is not contacting the 2 water streams. So it's a real opportunity where you can capture a ton of heat and reuse it effectively that what you're typically dumping down the drain. In some cases, we're even seeing people cool it before they are dumping it down the drain. So not only are you saving on reheat, but also potentially the cost of paying to cool down that wastewater. LED lighting, especially for cold environments. Cold environments are more difficult, as we all know. You have higher risks of failure. It takes a certain type of lighting or really any equipment to operate in those cold temperatures. That being said, there are significant not only annual energy savings, but also maintenance savings. When you don't have to change a light bulb out every 2,000 hours or roughly every 3 months, and you instead get 7 years of lifetime, that has a significant maintenance savings on your team's time, as well as the cost of the bulbs and equipment to replace. And then lastly, high-speed doors. So we see a lot of times dock doors, especially in refrigeration areas, where the doors are just wide open, especially if you're in the middle of production, you're on first shift. I can't tell you how many times we've walked around a facility and there has just been doors open all over, even trucks just wide open. And you have so much cold air just going out the door, literally. And there is technology now that will automate that so that they are basically through a sensor technology opening and closing that door whenever is needed. And usually it's rubber, so it obviously is taking safety into account as well. That can save significant energy. So where to start? So a lot of people don't know where to start. You may be in break fix mode, like I talked about, where you're just capital planning. Hey, what equipment is at its end of life, or what equipment is giving us fits and starts? How do I take initiative and potentially start to document that equipment and start to look at efficiency upgrade at a longer term scale? So what we recommend is, number one, developing an equipment inventory. It is very hard to do preventative maintenance. It is very hard to capital plan unless you know all of the equipment in the facility. So what are the model numbers? What is the age of the equipment? When was it last maintained? Who is the contractor that supports that maintenance, if it's internal or external? Documenting that and then keeping it as kind of a living will of the facility is incredibly important because it allows you to update it as you make additional upgrades. Number two, tracking utility consumption and costs, inclusive of the energy savings, tells the story. So at the end of the day, if you're able to start tracking how much did I spend and how much did I use last year versus this year, you're able to document basically all the improvements you're making. So you know that the preventative maintenance is truly working. Number three, documenting all projects with a standard format, meaning what is the cost savings, what are the electricity or natural gas savings, what is the energy savings, and what is the operational benefit. Tracking that programmatically and measuring your different projects against a standard set of rules will allow you to start to prioritize those projects in a really condensed way. Number four, making sure you are capturing any incentives or study grants that are available for this type of work. I can't tell you how many times we hear companies that just went and had an air handling unit or a refrigerant system break, and they immediately dumped $500,000 plus in to fix it as soon as possible. And they missed the boat on a six-figure incentive that would have paid for 20 to 30% of the project. So knowing what is available so that you can capture it, especially if it is time sensitive, is very important. And then lastly, upgrading the inventory and building drawings annually. So having a set point in time where you are updating that inventory and also capturing your drawings. It's so often we see renovations with drawings created, but then they're not synced into a kind of a master library. So linking all of those drawings together so that they can be shared and also used for future planning is very important.
Right on. Thanks, Chris. So I have a question I'm just going to throw out there. I'd like you to speak a bit more to it. So you've already mentioned it, right? Like we or facility operators, engineers typically get stuck in a break fix mentality, whereby if it's running, it's the way we've done it. They're more focused on, output and production. Can you talk through the different levels of audits and how we actually identify these different, energy optimization opportunities there are, and yeah, how we go about identifying them and the levels of like ASHRAE study and so forth? If you could dive into that quickly.
Yeah, ASHRAE has really defined what the different energy audit levels are. So a level one is really high level. It's looking at some of the data that you would ideally have compiled already here on the screen from like the immediate quick wins, and then doing a walkthrough of the plant to see if there are any low-hanging fruit opportunities. So lighting, steam traps, et cetera, those kind of come to mind. As well as, are there any major capital improvements that could be made on equipment that is clearly end of life? That is more high level. The costing assumptions as well as the saving assumptions are very generic, and they're based on just historical data. An ASHRAE level 2 audit kind of takes that to the next level. It's like a full 1 to 2 day walkthrough depending on the size of the plant, and it includes typically contractor walkthroughs as well as material quotes to get the projects identified to a salient project that could really be executed, kind of construction ready is what we call it. And then an ASHRAE level 3 is usually only used for certain types of projects that require metering. So in some instances, utilities will require it. Some of our customers, especially the larger ones, have certain data requirements. So if you're requiring metering to be installed to track how much steam is existing versus what will be installed, that's kind of what the level 3 elevates it to.
Awesome. Thank you. So now we'll please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We do have one. It's a great question. Chris, this would be directed at you. Do you have any resources suggesting of where to find incentives? I have many facilities in many different states and have a hard time finding comprehensive resources for this.
Part of the problem with the incentive programs is that they're marketed poorly, candidly. So it is sometimes hard where there are certain websites that will state what incentive programs are available. We can certainly share those resources to you. They're public domain, but I have found that they're not updated as frequently as I would like, especially this time of year in January, February, March timeframe when all the new programs roll out under each of the different utilities. That's really, there's a lag sometimes to capture that. So it's being on top of the utility incentive programs you're aware of. I would say, once you do a kind of a high level research, you'll realize that certain states really don't have anything, and there are others that have multiple different kind of levers you can pull. Knowing who the utility reps are that you can contact is really what's most important, because usually they are a great source of what has been pushed out, or what has been kind of granted by the government each year.
Great, thanks. So I guess following that track, do you facilitate financing for large scale capital? So how would you finance, or what sort of mechanisms can you utilize to execute?
Yeah, so there are a few different ways. I mean, I'm sure many people have heard energy as a service. That is one model. There is also certain utilities will have energy financing. There are energy financiers where if you have an energy project that is meeting a certain criteria of ROI, it can go through a energy efficiency fund effectively, that has a lower cost of capital than a standard loan. Sometimes the utilities, depending on the region, will even subsidize the loan further. So from a capital planning perspective, there definitely are options. And there's also a few municipal or kind of public options as well, depending on your jurisdiction.
And just to jump on that one too, there are also on-bill financing options depending on how you structure your procurement contracts, which is part of going back to our team mindset, right? Is if you have this communication between the needs of all the people in the organization, you can solve for that in creative ways. So we do help with financing. We've even found external third-party financiers for a project as well. So if that's a need, we're happy to continue that conversation.
Yeah, good point. That's a great program to be able to put that on a utility expense. So Ben, this one will be directed at you. How can a company project their savings before committing? So if you wanted to explore, natural gas or power procurement, what does the process look like?
Yeah, so one of the fun things, challenges, depends on your perspective, but one of the realities of working in a financial market, energy is a financial market, right? It's a commodity. The price changes day by day, hour by hour. When we work with clients, it very much is, here's what the current forward market is providing in terms of value today. And if you want to reevaluate that in a week, in a month, in 6 months, we will reevaluate based on what the current market is at that point. There's a variety of kind of tools and methods to get into that of, my budget was X and I really want to beat it this year, or I really need to meet it this year, or I can't go more than 5% above. Those sort of targets can be really helpful in calibrating what sort of risk profile you're willing to take. It is true over decade type timescales. The more you float, the more you save. But like we saw with Fern, or like we saw with Uri, or even Elliott in PJM in 22, you will get burned if you're floating large amounts. You will get burned over short time scales. So it really comes down to kind of a conversation with usually finance to help set those boundaries. But in terms of projecting what it is today, we do that all the time with clients to say, well, here's the market price now. What do you want to do?
That's great. So we have one more question and one more minute. So quick response here, Ben. This is for you. For a mid-sized organization currently using 100% fixed pricing model, what are the specific runway management milestones we should use to decide when to transition from a 25 to 50% hedge?
Great. Yeah, so if you're at 100% hedged now, you're probably in a very cost-sensitive, budget confidence cycle. You can still get to 100% fixed, but maybe getting there over 3 or 4 layers is more appropriate. And so the milestone really is, having that conversation early to say, what are our needs, and what timing do we get there? We've had one client who they really do hedge every 6 months, right? And they've got these windows where they say, we need to make one hedge every 6 months over time. So we have budget certainty, and in this example, they hit 80%, but they work backwards to say, okay, if we're hedging every 6 months and we need to have, 4 20% hedges, you take your flow date and you go back 2 years, and that's when they start. So it really just depends on kind of what structure you're trying to set for your own kind of corporate direction.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, that's 2:45. Thank you everyone so much for your time. Thank you for NPFDA, Wendy, Carol, and the rest of the team over there for your support and allowing us this opportunity to present. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. I believe this webinar will be placed somewhere. But Wendy, I'll hand it back to you to close. But thanks again for the opportunity here. We appreciate it.
And thank you so much, gentlemen. I learned more than I necessarily knew that I needed to. So I appreciate your expertise today. We have recorded everything. We will post it on NPFDA TV. We'll also send a copy of the slides to everyone who attended today. And we appreciate it. We hope to see you at the Spring Exchange meeting, which is April 13th through 15th in Asheville, North Carolina, and registration is open as of today. So thank you so much, everyone, for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.